So, hey everyone, my name is Martel Metellus. I am the founder and CEO of Soko. So, we are a discovery network, really a social network for young Black talent to connect, collaborate, and find new career opportunities within tech, specifically startups. Coming here, I wanted to talk a little bit more about, the story behind why I came in and did what I did, the startup that I created, and how we're continuously building, and what's really the mission behind this, and how you guys can essentially do the same thing, right? So, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the projects. Poverty, didn't really know what successful meant, didn't really know what careers I could look into, and I ended up moving to Arizona, where it was a completely different scenery. I was exposed to a lot of other things. And essentially what happened was that I started seeing new paths. What really struck me was athletics, because that is what I related to from my past, right? When I was in Brooklyn, New York, all I saw were, basketball players and rappers. And those were the only two people who were being successful in the communities that I lived in. So that's essentially the path I chose, because I saw that that was the only successful thing to me. So fast forward throughout high school, I'm going through, the basketball circuit. I'm leveling up. I'm getting better. I'm getting recruited. And I end up finding a school that I didn't even want to go to. It's called Babson College. It's an entrepreneurial school. And they provided me with the best opportunity. So I decided to go for basketball. I wanted to play overseas. It's a Division III school. It wasn't Division I. So I knew overseas could be an option. And once I became engulfed in the entrepreneurial community, I started really loving it, right? I started really seeing that I could do something within it. But I also started seeing a lot more people look at career paths I've never heard of. To be honest, like, management consulting, investment banking, working at a hedge fund, all of it, sales, right? Business development. These are all roles I'd never heard of. And, I started learning a lot about it. And towards my senior year of school, actually my junior year, I went to San Francisco, where I learned a lot more about the tech scene, how accelerated it was, how many people became successful, how collaborative that environment was, even very competitive, but it was also very collaborative, and people were actually building things that were meaningful. So that stuck out to me. I ended up consulting for a company called ClassPass right before they hit their $1 billion valuation. Ended up helping them bring Google into their customer base as the first customer they've ever had, which is a great accomplishment that I like to always say. But, after that point, it really got me into tech entrepreneurship. I started researching. I started reading a lot about, tech entrepreneurs, how they think. And a guy that really stuck out to me was Naval Ravikant. He was somebody who, had really a similar background as me, right? He was from India, came to the U.S., ended up living in I believe Brooklyn or Queens, Jamaica, Queens, which is actually where a lot of my family's from. And ended up going through and going to a prestigious school, ended up, learning a lot more about tech and learning how to code. And, he ended up becoming this really successful, startup entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur, built AngelList, and took off with that, right? So I studied him a lot. I studied a lot of other, entrepreneurs within the space. And I learned so much from studying that I was just like, I want to get into this. I want to start my own company. That was probably the wrong thing to do, because especially with startups, you don't want to just create something, create a problem and create a solution. Usually problems come to you, right? So fast forward towards my senior year, I decided, hey, look, I was personal training at the time while I was at school. Maybe that's going to be my career path. I spoke with a professor of mine. His name was Angelo Santinelli. So he was an angel investor. And I asked him, I was like, hey, I want to get into tech entrepreneurship. How do I do that? How do I get into this whole startup world? He's like, learn sales. And I was like, I don't want to learn, I don't want to be a used car salesman. I came to Babson to get a business degree. And long story short, he convinced me. He's like, listen, software sales is very different. It's very consultative and all that stuff. So fast forward, I go in, I network, and I find my first job within tech, right? Just IT software company. And I start learning that, well, I'm the only one here that's Black in this 700-person global company, right? And when I realized that really rubbed me the wrong way, and I started started moving in the office very differently. I just kept seeing people who just did not look like me. I probably found maybe 2 people out of the entire company that I could relate to that kind of looked like me. And that was a problem to me. And at the time, I was also still entrepreneurial. So I wanted to build out a platform, kind of like a Fiverr for Black freelancers, just to kind of help me find some more black people around me so I could work with them. That ended up not going too well. I didn't really understand, what it meant to build a company, what it meant to, create some type of value proposition. I didn't know any of that stuff. So I kind of just took a Fiverr template, slapped Soko on there, and that was it, right? Fast forward, George Floyd happens. After I had set that down, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. George Floyd happens and everybody's panicking. Everyone's going crazy, right? And I'm just sitting there like, wow, like, we need this. And everyone's reaching out to me like, Martel, you need to create Soko like that. I remember what you wanted to do. It's so valuable right now. Like, we need this. And I was skeptical. I was like, you know what? I don't want to create something again. I think, you guys probably won't like it. It's just something in the moment. And I did a lot of research and I realized that this is the time. This is the time in the market to do it. That's something I'm going to touch on in a little bit. But once I realized that, I ended up starting to build it, and it took off. People were responding left and right, like, we need this. Thank you so much for building this. I started building. So I had already built some sort of a community beforehand, which is what I would also recommend. Before you create any business, begin to build your community on any social media platform you feel the most comfortable with. For me, it was Twitter and Instagram. Instagram was something for fitness, but Twitter was my tech community, right? I built a strong Black tech community on Twitter. What I defined as strong as 2,000, 3,000 followers. And I ended up leveraging that to get a lot of insight on what they wanted. And I started building out Soko. And the thing that's interesting about what I did was I unintentionally realized that building a mission-based business or mission-based startup is the way to go. Because you get people who reach out to you and they're like, I just want to help because this mission aligns with what I want in life, right? And so you get a lot of really, really, highly talented people wanting to work with you for no money, right? Obviously you work some equity terms, but, for no money to really, make something take off. And when I realized it, I was like, man, like, this is incredible. Like, I'm getting people who want to work with me, and things were flowing, right? And we kept building and iterating. And, moving forward, it's gotten to the point now where we've launched our beta and we have people who are signing up. We have a lot of people who are excited about it, and we just continue to build. But, this goes back to what I wanted to talk to you guys about. It's just the process, right? Everybody wants to build something. Everybody has something in their brain that they're like, look, the world doesn't have this. It needs to have this. I want to be the one to create it, right? There are so many steps beforehand that you should consider. The first is build some sort of a skill. If you don't have a skill set, at least you need to have some skill set. For me, it was sales. Sales was my top skill set. That's what I worked for. That's what I worked in. So I understood how to sell things, how to create value propositions, how to, sell a mission, sell a vision to people to come work with me. Some people, they're really good at coding. They're really good at product design, really good at, creating software and things of that nature. Like, lean on your skill set. And when you lean on your skill set, then you can start leveraging other people to fill in the gaps that you don't know. But that comes with building your network beforehand. So you always want to build your network beforehand of people who could potentially work with you in the future. So because I did that, I ended up finding people very quickly, and I ended up building this whole thing up. And, the second thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is definitely make sure that what you're doing is clear, right? You have a clear mission. You have something, a North Star that you're going after, not something that's short-term, but something that's long-term. Because a lot of people, they have these short-term goals and they go for them, but then after that, there's nothing after, right? You want to always have this long-term vision that you have certain milestones that you want to hit. But yeah, Soraya said something that's very interesting. Being aware of which skills you do or do not have can be tricky sometimes. I agree. I think that is very tricky. That's why a lot of it is really tapping into yourself and really analyzing yourself, because most people don't sit down and really think to themselves like, hey, what have I? And the other thing I actually want to say about that, because I felt the same way. When you really are non-biased about it, it makes it so much easier, because for me, it was always sales, but I always ran away from it because I was like, that's not a valuable skill set. Like, even though, I know it is now, at the time I was like, I want to learn product design. I want to be that guy that knows how to code. That's not my skill set, right? And I had to admit to that. I had to realize that that's not it. So when I realized that sales was my skill set, I owned it, right? And it helped me bring other people on board, because when people see that you have a skill set that's valuable, they're more comfortable coming in and leveraging their skill sets, because they know they're combining something that's powerful with something else that's powerful, right? So that, I guess, to answer what you said there. But when I finally got the skill set and everything figured out, that's when I just decided to, push through and decide to build this thing. And it's been going really well so far. And I think for everybody who's trying to build a startup, like I said, always have a mission, and always network. Always be networking, no matter what. And I know it sounds cliche. Everyone's like, network, but be strategic about it. Figure out who in the future you'd want to work with. That's the most important thing, because a lot of people can understand, or they can sense being desperate, or someone who's desperate. You want to come in without the scarcity mindset, or like the mindset of, I need this connection really quickly to create things. You want to build long-term relationships and think ahead, which, right now, you guys are in a great position, because if you're thinking about starting a business, you can take the time to do that and then end up starting it and then have a head start over a lot of people who haven't done that, right? I mean, I unintentionally did that, but now that I'm conscious of it, it makes a lot of sense to me. But those are the things that I would recommend, especially if you want to build something that's huge, which I think everybody has the potential to build something that's huge in their own way. It's just a matter of, you need to figure out what uniquely differentiates you from everybody else, and really leverage that. What uniquely differentiates your vision from somebody else's, right? I had to fight with that all the time. I had people that were like, hey, this is the same as this is the same as that. And then I'd tell them, hey, look, no, this is actually unique because of X, Y, and Z. And they'd be like, oh, okay, I get it. This is actually, I understand now. So, being steadfast on your vision is very, very important. And for me, it took a lot of just self-understanding. Again, this may sound cliche, but take the time to meditate. Like, you'll understand your strengths and your weaknesses a lot better when you sit in silence and really think about yourself. For me, that helped tremendously. And now that I have a clearer vision of what my skill sets are, I can leverage that, right? I can run sales processes from the company I have now until we have a VP of sales. Like, it's the same for anybody else who's trying to build. It's super important to, I hope I'm saying this right, Soraya. Like Soraya said, practicing mindfulness brings clarity. 100%. Mindfulness is the greatest gift, or the greatest skill set, I believe, in any human being. All humans have it. We're just so distracted by so many different things that, oh yeah, so I got it right. Soraya Mariah, got it. Perfect. Our thing. Is it Mariah? Or Maria? Saria, I guess. Saria, I'm gonna say Saria. Perfect. Okay, great. But yeah, like I was saying before, and to what Saria was saying, mindfulness is key, especially when you're trying to build startups, especially in tech, where everything is it moves so fast, and you get lost in the process. And sometimes you have to step back and really just observe yourself, observe who you are, and figure out how you fit in this whole chaotic world of startups. Because it's chaotic, but there is space for people who are different, or for people who think different, right? Diversity and inclusion is not something that is worked on in tech, right? At all, I don't think, not as much. And for me to come in and do that within tech is very unique. It's different. So, creating just different parallels with different things, and just connecting the dots is super important to create something that's valuable. But that was kind of my story behind, Soko and what it's doing. Our whole goal, our whole vision is to basically bring diversity to the startup world, bring diversity to companies, but specifically startups. Because the thing with startups that's interesting is that when you first come into a startup, you're valued tremendously, because there's not as many people within that startup. So when you come in, there's so much opportunity to create an impact versus when you go to a huge company like Dell or Microsoft, they've already had their infrastructure of people laid out. So you're kind of fighting against a huge tide, and it's really hard to make any type of impact. But you go to a startup, any little thing you do is impactful, right? So the more diversity we have within startups, those startups end up becoming the Microsofts and the HPs that you see, right? Those startups become those bigger companies that end up changing the entire world. So for us to be a part of something like that, that's huge, and that's what we're building. We're essentially seeing that, okay, we need diversity in tech and companies in general. How do we get the earliest point of access? And that's startups. So that's essentially what we're looking at and trying to bring underrepresented people into the tech world. Tech is literally our gateway to wealth, I believe, for all underrepresented and disadvantaged groups, because tech is the most democratized field that I've seen, right? And it's just permissionless for the most part. If you know how to create things, if you know how to build visions and storytell and do all these things, it's permissionless. You can create anything. So, that's my biggest, I would say, takeaway from just the tech industry and how to really, make things happen. Like I said, make sure that you can network with people, not just Black people, but also, Latinx people, white people, everybody. Try to really build your network, because you never know who can help you. I've had white people help me a lot with what I wanted to do, because they believe in the vision. They also believe in me as a person because I've known them for a while, right? With networking is huge. Let's see. Saria says those startups are riskier and some may not have a safety net if it fails, unfortunately. You see, I get that. I hear that. And I think that's a sentiment that a lot of, especially the Black community, we're very risk averse, because, if you think about it, we've never really had opportunities, and it's scarce. And that's the way that we really think. We're like, everything's scarce. We need to go for, the safest bet. But the craziest thing about startups is, and this may sound contradictory, but startups are actually extremely safe. Not in the sense of they won't fail, but in the sense of you come in, you're going to learn so much and you're going to network so much and so quickly that even if that startup fails, it'll always propel you to the next one, right? That's how so many people in the startup world, they thrive, because they go into a startup, they do really well, they get known, right? People talk about them, they get into these networks, and then let's say that startup fails. Not only do they get the experience we've gotten at a smaller company, they also are able to go out and go work for somebody else that they had networked with, who then started another company and raised a lot of money, right? So either way, you're learning a lot within startups, more than you could at a bigger company, easily. You would argue bigger companies have, a track, right? They have a track to success. I would argue not as much as startups, because startups is where real life actually exists. In a big company, for example, Google, that's fairy tale land. Like, no way is life like Google. Google is its own world. You come out of Google, you have to learn life. You're in startups, you're learning life at like full speed. Like, things are coming up, right? Things are breaking. You have to fix things. You may be in operations today. You may be in product the next day. You may be in sales the next day. You may be in business development. There are so many just different things that you have your hands in. So your experience and your knowledge of building companies grows, which is why so many people, even if startups fail, they go out and they start their own thing, and they have the network to go do that. So I think startups, like Saria says, it's a launch pad. I think every minority should get into startups, especially now, because there's a lot of money being pumped into them. There's a lot of learning opportunities. There's a lot of networking opportunities. And who cares if it fails, right? If it fails, you've learned tremendously. And failure, to be honest, in the tech world is considered a good thing, because you ended up learning a lot more than you would have, even if it succeeds. Of course, we all want the things that we are part of to succeed, but if it doesn't, the mindset is, hey, I learned a lot from there. Now to find my next opportunity, let me go reach out to my Rolodex of networks to get into another company, right? That's what I would recommend for anybody who's either, like on the edge of startups or trying to figure out, how to break in. If you want to break into startups through sales, tech sales especially, reach out to me. That's what we do at Soko. We connect Black talent to startups, specifically Black sales talent to startups, because that is their biggest challenge right now in terms of hiring, and that's where diversity matters the most, to be honest with you, because that's like the culture of a company that's starting out. So definitely that's pretty much what I have in terms of information. I know I've talked a lot, but I hope you guys found some value in what I had. Would definitely, anybody interested in anything that I've said, on Twitter, my email martel@joinsoko.com, and I can actually put that in as well. Oh yes, getting diversity in at the ground floor is so important. I think that's where most of these diversity placement companies fail, is they put talent into these huge companies, like for example, my company, 700 person company. I'm one of 4 Black people. I'm always going to feel isolated. I go into a startup, there's like 20, 30 people. I'm one of 30. That's way better than one of 700. So, startups is like the key. I think that's where talent, diverse talent, needs to be pumped into, because that's literally like the ground floor of company. That's like the foundation, the bedrock of all company. Imagine, a black person was in Microsoft when Bill Gates was coding it, right? Or when Bill Gates was just starting to sell the software. A huge difference within the company, right? Huge, completely different picture. So yeah, that's the thing that I'll say the most is, like Surya said, ground floor is important. And that's my mission, is to get as much diversity in the startup world as possible, because that's literally where I believe the most wealth can be created right now. When it comes to, working for somebody, building sweat equity and all of that type of stuff. Most definitely. It's a crazy time, especially now when, a lot of companies are looking to build diversity, but they don't know how. They're looking to grow and create new opportunities for, people of color, Black and brown people. They're looking, they just don't know how to do it. And they don't realize, especially startups, I'm like, man, you guys just raised $10 million. You have a lot of money and you need to hire fast. This is such a perfect opportunity to bring in, underrepresented talent to help you grow, especially within sales. I keep saying sales because people don't realize that literally is the greatest skill you can ever have, is sales. Like, you're always selling. You're selling yourself. You're selling your company if you have one. You're selling your own brand. You're selling your ideas to people. You're literally constantly selling throughout this life. So learning that skill, not only is it an important skill, but it's probably the highest paying skill. Because if you think about it, business doesn't exist without sales, right? You need to have sales. So if you have sales and you have that skill set, the people at companies, startups, even bigger companies, the salespeople make the most money out of anybody. Believe it or not, a salesperson will make more money than the CEO, because they're closing deals and they're getting percentages depending on how much that product is of those huge yearly deals, right? So, their pay is going to be huge. It's not about salary, it's about commission. And if that product is valuable, you're always going to be able to sell it. So that commission almost becomes guaranteed, and you get paid a lot and you learn a lot, right? So yeah, that's why I'm a big proponent of tech sales, man. If you get into there, you change your whole life, right? But that's my take. I know I got a little bit of time left, but I'll be chilling out here. If anybody's interested in, talking, definitely put something in the chat for me. Would love to get some conversations going. Of course, Surya, thank you for listening. I'm glad that I was able to at least give some sort of knowledge into what I know. I know very little, but hopefully that little makes a big difference. So yeah, I will close this off. But again, thank you guys for listening. Definitely excited to hear any follow ups who are interested in learning more. Thank you.